Right, welcome to another episode of Stockport Grammar School Talks Sport. Today's guest has a vast background in education and sport. He's worked in the independent sector, accumulating 30 years of education in different roles, from director of sport to head of hockey, working at different schools, including Repton Junior School, Birkenhead School, and recently retired, but that's not stopped him keeping going and keeping busy. He's moved back up to the northwest, took a master's in psychology, also started a PhD where he works with coaches and coach developers and looks at how they learn. And he's currently England under-18s hockey manager. Welcome to Stockport Grammar School Talk Sport, Nick Clark. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, no, good stuff. I give you the briefest of introductions there, but first question, would you want to go a little bit more into detail about your background and your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, so in terms of sport, I grew up in East Lancashire at a grammar school there with people won't remember this, but grass hockey pitches, and we played hockey there. And the reason we played hockey there is because there was a time of a teacher strike, and therefore the football teacher, I played football before that, was a member of the NUT, and they struck. So hockey was the only sport that was left on. So all the footballers then played hockey, which I've been trying to do in my coaching for years, try and recruit more footballers. But yeah, so there I played. I did quite well. I played for England at junior level, and then worked my way through. I went to Loughborough to do a PE degree, and eventually moved into teaching down in Cambridge and Bury St Edmunds, where I played for a club called Southgate, and played for England 33 times, both indoor and outdoors, and then moved into coaching. So obviously I was teaching full time, started down south, and then moved back up north, as you mentioned, to Birkenhead School. Got involved coaching pretty early on, really, probably around the age of 30 with the national age groups. Initially on the men's side, on the under 16s, under 18s, eventually the 21s. So then, don't think I mentioned to you, but I took a year out. We went to New Zealand.
Oh, wow.
We tried to go for a big move, but it didn't work. I think I got a bit homesick and came back. But I did a lot of ladies coaching then. So when I came back to England that year later with the family, then got involved in the England 16s and then the 21s, and then did the senior indoors. So I think I nearly had the full house by that stage. And then obviously I moved down to Kent College in Canterbury, where I was director of sport. And as you'll understand, as I'll explain later to one of the later questions, I think, decided to focus on that, or was moved into focusing on that, as I'll explain later. And now retired, I decided to do an MSc in psychology, which I've really enjoyed. And that's kind of motivated me to take research a little bit further. I do some coach development at Bowden, and I've also done a little PWM. So yeah, really interested in how coaches learn, how coach developers learn, and just looking at different environments. And hopefully I'll be looking at a football environment once we've finalised the exact question.
Right.
So that was a quick whistle-stop tour.
What does high performance mean to you?
High performance, I think there was that mindset of that aim to be the best in all areas, not just the sport itself, but in every, kind of a holistic viewpoint. And I'd also bring in kind of that feeling, and probably I'm biased towards team games, kind of a common purpose, having high levels of collaboration. There's that cultural aspect that I think has always been a essential part of high performance.
Role models and people who influenced you on your journey, and is there anybody in particular who's done that, and why?
Yeah, tricky one, because I went for in terms of my coaching, I received no coaching when I was younger, which is probably the modern way to go now, because I learned from my mistakes. I learned by just playing and just training, and so the first coach I had was probably a few of the England junior coaches, but that was all a bit sporadic. So my first coach was at my club at Southgate, a guy called David Vinson.
Right.
Unfortunately departed now, but he was kind of very detailed in the technical aspects, which is probably what I needed at that time. So in terms of a player, he was a big influence on me. Not necessarily as a coach as I got older, because I kind of saw the pros and cons of the style of coaching.
Yeah.
But later on, I wouldn't say there was anyone in particular. I think it's just picking up things from a lots of coaches that I was with, and I kind of experienced all sorts: autocratic coaches, very player-led coaches. I saw pros and cons in all of those methods, really. But David Vinton probably my biggest influence as a player, just in terms of it was kind of wowee. This is just more detail than I've ever had, and it just made a massive difference to me. And I was in a very good side, which probably helped a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So that would be an influence, and just playing with those players again, coming from a kind of provincial, and hockey can be very Southern based. I think it was kind of coming from an area in which I was a state school pupil, and hockey's always been very public school dominated.
Yeah.
I remember traveling from the first under-16 game and just seeing the schools we went to. It was just kind of wowee. This is a different world.
Yeah.
So it was my kind of stubbornnness to say, right, I'm going to compete here. I want to compete. So from a playing side, anyway, coaching, lots of different sources, really.
No, good. And then just going off track a little bit, you went to New Zealand for a year there. Do you see any noticeable differences between the UK and New Zealand in terms of coaching and culture in terms of sport?
Wow, that's a left field question. Yeah, it's a good one, because it's interesting, this, and I don't know whether people would agree with me who live in New Zealand, but when I went there, I didn't go as a teacher.
Yeah.
I went as a coach in a certain area, an area called Hawke's Bay, which is very nice. And I worked in a multi-sport centre, very smart, very forward-thinking.
Yeah.
And I must admit, in the schools there were, and I did some work in schools and in various clubs, and I found it very egalitarian.
Yeah.
I found that there was this impression that you go to New Zealand to do a bit of hockey, and actually you're going to be dominated by rugby. Yeah. And I never found that. At all. I found there was a degree of respect for every sport they did. So even things like you never consider much in England, like touch rugby, was a massive sport. And after school, there'd be people out on the fields just playing touch rugby. Yeah. And it was kind of, or they'd just go down the hockey pitch and play, or I think they valued every type of sport, and they valued every type of gender sport. There was no kind of, I'd just done boys coaching, men's coaching, and I just felt it was much more open and freer in that sense. Yeah. I don't know whether that's the same now, but that's what I found when I went there.
Everyone has ups and downs in their journey. What's your biggest setback professionally?
Okay.
How did you overcome this?
Yes, I thought that was a very pointed question. In terms of my coaching, I'll be quite candid, really.
Yeah.
I came back from New Zealand. I coached the under-16s for 4 years. We'd done quite well I thought I had. 21s, I then took them for 2 years. We got a silver medal at the Europeans. Thought I was going really well. This was just before London.
Yeah.
And as usual with these cycles, there's normally a move around of staff, and there was. So I applied for the head coach for GB Women.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that. A guy called Jason Lee got it, who'd moved from the men to the women, which was fair enough because he'd been to 2 Olympics, got great experience. And then I went for the assistant, and I thought I'd really got a good chance of that. And I didn't get it. And I was absolutely devastated with that. From a kind of, I really pushed myself into working with England hockey and trying to get a full-time role there. And that was my career ambition. But that was kind of a bit, right, where do I go now? So it was a real, I had my teaching job as a real backup. I was always there and ready. I always had another role to be in. And I really struggled with that, to be honest, because it was kind of, I've done this for 20 years and the door's been slammed. Yeah. And I'm sure there were good reasons, but it was, and so how did I overcome it? I probably had to I certainly decided, because director of sport, as you'll know, can be a pretty all-consuming job.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. I threw myself into that. Not that I wasn't already, but it was kind of, right, this is where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And I had to make some decisions about my time,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously if you're involved with England, you're normally doing your school job, you're probably coaching a club, and then you've got your England stuff. And so I felt at that point, right, it doesn't look as if I'm going to progress here. So I had to make a pretty ruthless decision to say, right, I'm not going to try and get back into it.
Yeah.
And so how did I probably change my identity a bit. I probably just changed my focus. That was probably it. As simple as that. I had enough going on, but it was just, but coming to terms with that was quite tough, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I bet.
Yeah.
And then go on.
No, it inspired my dissertation, my psychology. So my dissertation at the end of my master's last year was on stresses in coaching.
Yeah.
So I looked at the stresses that all the national A group coaches in hockey were kind of subject to. I mean, it's no different from other occupations in a way, but that probably is where it inspired from, because as a part-time coach going into a national governing body, sometimes you school on a Friday, you're at Lillishall on a Saturday, and you're expected to be all singing or dancing, and you've got your marking and you've got your parental emails, and it's kind of, wow, how do you manage all that? So I look back now and think, how did you ever do it?
Yeah. No,
so yeah, there we are. That's another tangent.
Yeah, no, good. And then in terms of, obviously, on the flip side, you've had many accomplishments along your journey, and probably still more to come. But what are you most proud of, and why?
Proud of and why? Ooh. Well, I've gone left field on this one, which is a bit different, really. Because I've gone off sport. I'm most proud of my family, really.
Yeah.
So in short, I mean, in terms, I could go back a long distance and say, in terms of coaching, I think that under-21 silver medal was probably the best kind of coaching achievement. On the indoor, we went from the C division to the A division, which was a bit of a battle, but we did really well. So there's those achievements. I was named Performance Coach of the Year in 2012.
Yeah.
That was probably a death knell rather than an award. I don't know, coinciding with that, really. But just my general school stuff, those, I look back and think, yeah, we did well here, not just on the performance sport, but also on developing a program that as many pupils could access different sports. That was always a big thing for me. And my kind of head of girls' games was very, very proactive and very supportive of that. In a school that kind of had limited options, it was either rugby or hockey or cricket, and we brought in many different options. I like to think we were one of the first schools that brought in girls' cricket to any degree. I think we won the national final about 5 years ago, I think, at under 13 level. It's kind of bringing in those things. So we're always open to new ideas, and I look back and I think those were good achievements in the physical education world, anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then next question, we're asking this to all our guests. What are your 3 non-negotiable behaviours you'd expect from yourself or anybody else you come into contact with?
Right, okay. I'll go honesty.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not going to get any new ones from me, I don't think. Honesty in your negotiations with people.
Yeah.
And hopefully you get that from your players. Obviously, that's a big topic. As a coach, when are you completely honest? When are you not completely honest? But I think that's another discussion. Kind of dignity in your behaviour. I think as coaches, we all have our moments where we deviate from that. But just whether it is dignity on the sideline, dignity in your relationships, that type of thing's always been very important. And probably as I'm getting older, probably maintaining a positive environment.
Yeah.
I think that's become much more important to me now, really. And just maintaining and although we want to understand energy sappers in a team environment, there are times where you just want a positive environment. So, but again, that's another big topic of how to deal with those people. So there's 3. I hope they're okay.
Yeah, no, very good. Awesome. And then last one for me. If Nick Clark was to go back to being a 12-year-old boy back at school, what advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now?
Wow. I'm just trying to think of different environments, really. 12-year-old environment. Seek more advice. From a playing point of view, get more input on. I probably wasn't the quickest, so therefore, if I sought more advice on how to improve my speed at an early age, you just didn't get that input then. You just, you did your 3-mile run, and that's, I think, that all I did up and down hills in Rottenstall. So I could go forever, but there was no speed. So seek more advice as a general rule, I would say. Seek advice of your coaches. What else? Be more resilient at times. So be more resilient to upsets and disappointments. See it as a long journey rather than a short one. I think that's very important for all school people, isn't it? That resilience to bounce back and not be disappointed. Particularly see it with in the age group stuff where players might not get picked at under 16, but they might come back later. But it's a harder route. There's no doubt about it. It is a harder route. So just that persistence and resilience to keep going in those environments, knowing there might be a chance later on. So I think that would be. So there's two things. The two things I would say. Third thing, job-wise, balance my time with family. That would be a big thing. But that's been a real dilemma. Doing the work. And knowing that if I work a bit harder, I probably will get some rewards out of that school-wise. But also having a bit more balance and giving some more time to yourself.